my laptop like most of you are. I would like to welcome all the students and our guest experts on PTSD and civilian first responders. This is one of many webinars that the Behavioral and Social Sciences faculty and our department chair, Misty Wilson, brings to our students each semester. So first off, welcome, and I would like to thank our guests for sharing their expertise and sharing their time with us this evening. A few things for students. I would like for you to refrain from raising your hand if at all possible. That's the little icon at the bottom of center screen. Also refrain from sharing your mic or your video cam. Those all should be disabled, but if they're not, only the moderators, our guest speakers, myself, and our department chair, Misty, will be speaking this evening. I would also like to remind you that at the end of this session, there will be a short survey, and that survey is what we will count your attendance as. So if you're attending on behalf of another instructor, not myself, but maybe your history instructor or your government instructor, please be sure to fill out the short survey at the end. And if you have questions, we will have a Q&A session towards the end. So feel free to use your chat bar to forward your questions, type your questions in as the presentation is going on, and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. I would like to next welcome our guest speakers. Alexandra Baran is she's a member of the Department of Homeland Security Active Threat Scenario Team in Cook County, Chicago. She is also a consultant for Haggerty Consulting, where she's worked on various emergency management projects with the local, state, and federal agencies all across the country. And she's currently working as an emergency manager at High Point University. She also has taught in higher education. And we also have Thomas Barnett. He was a violent crime detective and a patrolman working as a tactical officer for about 10 years. He was promoted to sergeant with the Chicago Police Department, and he's currently working with the 11th District and is the sergeant of a tactical team. Our last guest speaker is Armando Silva. He has volunteered for Rubicon and Red Cross in the Chicago area. He's served over 10 years in the U.S. Army in chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear unit, and was a sergeant with a deployment from 2003 to 2005 in efforts of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was a first responder for a private ambulance company in the Chicago area, and he's also worked at Rush University in their simulation lab as an instructor. And Armando currently is a paramedic in charge with the Chicago Fire Department with over 14 years of experience in his field of paramedicine. So welcome again, our guest speakers. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you all, and you can speak in whichever order you'd like to speak in. And thank you again for sharing your expertise with our students this evening.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Alex, you with us?
Yeah, looks like she's sharing her slide there.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, perfect. So I'll start, and again, thank you for those introductions. And so first we'll talk about how we met and how this all kind of came to be. So we three met in our grad program at the University of Chicago, which was in threat and response management. And then at the end of, obviously, just like, you know, getting any other degree, you have to do a thesis. But we were able to do a group capstone. And so Thomas and Armando were obviously the first responders that had a lot of experience, and I was kind of the researcher that put it all together. Really quick agenda, so we'll do a really quick overview of our study. Then we'll quickly go over PTSD, as well as we'll do a quick overview of kind of the background preliminary research we did before getting our own data. And then we'll talk about the results of our data gathering, and then some recommendations we came up with, and then obviously open up the floor to some questions. So what we did, and I usually butcher this word the first time, but we did a phenomenological study. Oh, that was good. And what that means is it's a qualitative study, not a quantitative study. So instead of dealing with numbers and numeric data and analyzing those, a phenomenological study is basically researching a shared experience amongst participants. So instead of, again, going to the numeric data, we were looking at experiences and what people went through and what people shared going through this same phenomenon. And the goal of our study was to explore the current knowledge, attitudes, practices, and challenges regarding PTSD in the first responder workplace, and to broaden our existing knowledge and then be able to provide some recommendations. A lot of people kind of connect PTSD with like veterans or sexual assault victims, and it's kind of you hear a lot less about PTSD and first responders in general. So we thought it was a really interesting thing to explore. So first we had to gather interviewees. So we wanted people that had boots to the ground experience who were either first responders or worked with first responders. And then we had 3 individuals from the police department with a total of 80 years of experience. We had 3 individuals from fire and EMS who had a combined 85 years of experience. And then we also had 4 mental health professionals with 50 years of experience, but everyone combined had over 215 years of combined experience. So we had a really good kind of temperature gauge of, older individuals who were more experienced, as well as newer individuals to the field who, again, weren't as experienced and kind of saw the first responder workplace a different way. And everyone really knows what PTSD means, so I'm not going to really go into it, but it's defined in the DSM-5 as being exposed to a traumatic event that triggers symptoms in intrusion, avoidance, negative changes in cognition and mood, and changes in arousal and reactivity. And doing our preliminary research, we realized that a lot of the statistics and information out there were very reactionary. So they were usually a collection of statistics after a large-scale incident such as 9/11. But there wasn't a lot of focus on the actual personal experience and what the implications of PTSD were for first responders. PTSD was previously included as an anxiety disorder, but is now under trauma and stress-related disorders. And the grim reality. So PTSD, first responders, they see trauma almost on a daily basis. So you have individuals that are going through trauma almost on a daily, weekly basis, and sometimes for many years. A lot of first responders are lifers, and they're in for life until they retire. But when you think about it, that's a lot of traumatic experiences to go through and then, be able to get through personally on your own. And again, first responders, they don't live the normal civilian life. They see things that, that are tragic and horrible. There's a lot of data out there, and about the numbers out there are about 5 to 9 to 22% of first responders will develop PTSD or some kind of traumatic stress disorder. But the number we kept seeing the most was around 10%. And there are roughly about over 1 million law enforcement officers in the United States, as well as over about 1 million firefighters and close to 300,000 EMS workers. And so when you think about it, that's about 2.3, 2.5 million people that could essentially be affected by trauma. And again, these are individuals in our community that are, doing well for the community and going out there and, saving people's lives. So you have a lot of these people that are doing really important jobs that, again, are kind of going through their own issues, and they might not exactly, know how to go about getting help. And on the high end, if we go from 22% people suffering from PTSD, that's over 500,000 people. So again, a lot of people affected. The 4 symptoms include intrusion, which is having nightmares, flashbacks, unwanted thoughts, or repetitive memories. negative alterations in cognition and mood, so having persistent negative emotions like fear or guilt, avoidance, so avoiding people, places, or things, or situations or objects that might trigger some kind of reaction. And then lastly, arousal and reactivity, which includes self-destructive behavior and problems with sleeping and concentration. This is really interesting that popped up in our research, was that more experienced workers tended to value support from their coworkers as most important, while the newer and less experienced first responders mostly highly valued support from their families. But in general, peer support is very important. But when you think about it, you know, these individuals are going through these traumatic events with the same, you know, with the individuals they work with, so they're most likely to connect with them and kind of know what they're going through, instead of a civilian who, again, is not in the first responder workplace and, you know, doesn't go through the same things they do on a daily basis. And treatment, so veterans, accident victims, and sexual assault victims, they can all basically be effectively treated with either cognitive behavioral therapy, prolonged exposure, and stress inoculation therapy. And what those all really share are just re-exposure and desensitization to stressful memories. Internal and external factors. Some evidence shows that having previous traumatic disaster or event or disaster experience seems to increase your PTSD risk, but there's also information that says the total opposite, that says that repeated exposure may lower levels of PTSD. Again, this is a very kind of gray area thing, right? It's a psychological matter, and not everyone is affected by it the same way, for the same length of time, or are triggered in the same way. So it's really difficult, again, to kind of explore this topic. And again, in today's world, there just isn't enough research done in this arena in the first place. I also thought it was really interesting that human-made disasters tended to trigger PTSD in disaster workers more than natural disasters. There are four main kind of root factors on why individuals may not go and get help. First responders have really crazy schedules. They work so much overtime. So a lot of their resources that are available to them are open on a normal, business, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 schedule. So they also have difficulties with time or opportunities to go and get the help that they need. So again, that's kind of the first obstacle in their way. There's still a huge perceived negative stigma, which Tom and Armando will get into, of seeking mental help for mental health reasons. And that has a lot of factors to it. So again, individuals don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be seen as not able to do their jobs. First responders are again looked at as those helpers and savers in society. And so when they themselves aren't, able to save themselves in a sense, they kind of don't know how to deal with that. Another huge factor is if they're the only person in their group that is affected. So, you may see the same traumatic experience as your coworkers, but if you don't see them struggling, but you're struggling yourself, you start wondering, well, if they're able to get through this and, they're not being affected by this, why am I being affected by it? And as I said earlier, there's still a lack of structure and resources and relationships with especially higher education institutions to really surveil and research PTSD in general. Again, there's a lot more information regarding PTSD in veterans and sexual assault victims, and PTSD in first responders tends to kind of be on the back burner. It's not as much of a popular topic as the others. And then I'm going to pass it off to Armando and Tom to speak about the results of their data gathering and analysis.
Good afternoon. So Tom and I will split up the results. First of all, can you guys hear me? I know I was having some issues earlier.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So Tom and I are going to split up the results here. So on this first slide that you guys are seeing here, one of the things that we did, we interviewed Tom and myself. We interviewed about 6 people, or actually 10 people, that dealt with the first responders as far as the PTSD, kind of like from a mental health perspective. And what we gathered is that they state that while we get first responders, they require obviously obvious training, with their gear, with physical security, and and education to maintain their licenses and whatnot. What seems to be lacking is the proactive approach to implementing some mental health care for the first responders. It seems like everything seems to be a kind of reactive approach instead of a proactive. Um, so if you look, some of the quotes that were given to us by people that we interviewed, one of them is if you look at the man hours again, if you look at the man hours that we've been trained through, can you hear me? Individual training and daily training, we're supposed to have supervision and CEUs for licenses, but there's really nothing there for behavioral health. It is very slim to none. Now there has been progress made as of late, where we are, the tide is turning to where there is more mental health. As at this point, it's still lacking behind everything that we train for.
Yeah, so then moving on to result number 2, as you can see on the slide there, the cumulative effect is the constant exposure to the traumatic or stressful events over a period of time, where all of our first responders receive much more exposure and re-exposure to these traumas and traumatic events on a continuous basis. So what we were looking at was when you have any department that does, especially with like EMS, in a city like Chicago, unfortunately, we have a large violence issue going on in the city. And in talking to some of these EMS professionals, we come to find out that you have 10, 15, 20, 25 runs a day, and you look at the fact, the fight or flight response, that trauma that they see, it's tough for them to manage what's going on. Acute stress disorder, depression, and PTSD tend to go hand in hand, with many sufferers having a combination of the three, which that also poses a problem. Latent PTSD can appear 6 months or more after a traumatic incident, which makes pinpointing the exact traumatic incidents particularly difficult. So you really can't find that one possible, the one trigger. It's just a matter of a cumulative effect of all the triggers that you're going through. If the first responder begins suffering PTSD longer down the road, the further you work and the longer that you work, it's going to be harder to go back and pinpoint exactly where this incident happened or what was the first cause of the incident that happened. And when we spoke to another professional, they stated it's not as much as a single incident. It's that cumulative effect that both the physiologically and emotionally that we're all concerned about. So if the problem with current monitoring systems, it's that we're having as Alexander says, we're having a reactionary based program instead of the preventative, sorry about that, and proactive ones, which threatens employment status. So there is a change going on that I've noticed, at least in the police department right now, where there's been more and more focus with trying to destigmatize this issue and trying to let officers, especially when they come on the job right away, know that you're going to, there's a chance that you may experience this, or one of your partners may experience this, or someone else that you might run into on the street might experience this. Especially in a city like Chicago, where gang violence is so rampant. Part of the problem is that even though our study focused on first responders, the people that we go to help, the people that we're arresting, the people that Armando treats and takes to the hospital, they may also be suffering from PTSD too, just from the simple fact that they're living in an area where there's violence every day. They're seeing friends and family members die on a continuous basis. So, you put that on top of where you're at already as a professional, and it gets kind of exasperated by what's going on. So The preventative measures are complicated due to the difficulty of using the methods to predict and monitor whether someone will have an adverse traumatic reaction in the future. That's part of the problem with the preventative aspect, is that it's easier to treat the reactive part, because the preventative part, how are you going to know when someone's going to be triggered and something's going to happen? And as we talked to on the next slide, you'll see, as we talked to one of the officers, the question is, what happens when the issues really start to rise up in a couple months from a past incident, for 4 or so months out of that incident? It's going to be more and more difficult to pinpoint what's causing it and how to handle such an incident and how to get help. So with what we have right now in the police department, we can get referred to what's called the Employee Assistance Program, the EAP, and the EAP will work with the first responder. Part of the problem that officers have, at least, is that we have to carry what's called an FOID card for possession of a firearm in the state of Illinois for law enforcement. If you are considered, if you're put into a mental health facility, like an actual hospital for it, they can revoke your FOID card, which therefore would make you not able to work as a law enforcement officer. So there is definitely some of that that's a problem with coming out and saying that, yeah, I have a problem. Now, if you just seek treatment and you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, that does not revoke your FOID card. So it's getting that information out as a preventative measure to try to let people know it's okay to come forward if you're having these issues, to explain, what's bothering you, why it's bothering you. Because, as Alexandra stated earlier, is the more veteran officers, they feel more comfortable talking to other officers. That's good to a point. Unfortunately, though, you're going to be dealing with people that may be having the same problems with you, which is good to talk to, but it's also bad because they're not going to be best suited to professionally help you. The other flip side to that is, if you're a newer officer, as we found, and you enjoy talking to your family, or you find it helpful, that now you're bringing all that home to your family, and that could be a burden to them, and you may not want them to know what you're going through on the street. So, it's just right now we're trying to figure out a way to hopefully get more preventative than reactionary. So every department's got, there's a fitness for duty standard on every department. If the employee doesn't pass a psychological test, which we do have to go through on the police department in Chicago, they have to pass these psychological tests to make sure that they're fit. Also, if they're what we call psyched during once they get on the job, that member can't go back onto the street until it's been, that they've been found that they're capable of getting back on the street. Part as a supervisor like myself, that's our objective, unfortunately, is sometimes just to get people back on the street. Supervisors also need to have the capability to be, sympathetic and empathetic to these officers and know what they're going through. And, if we don't, a lot of times, if we don't see their symptoms as interfering with their work, then we may not have a way to address it, or a way to keep them from getting worse down the road. And then we have the fear of losing employment or facing negative consequences due to reactionary methods. There's, that stigma thing again, where it's just very tough for officers and paramedics and firemen. You don't want to be that guy. There's always that stigma, that guy that you can't take what's going on out there. We got to get past that. And then, unfortunately, especially in Chicago, which I believe for police departments have the highest rate of suicide amongst police department members nationwide, we have a substance abuse problem. And there's with some of these officers, they unfortunately they like to indulge in alcoholic beverages. And then when you contribute, or when you take your PTSD and then you add alcohol or drugs, which we are drug tested for, that exacerbates the problem and makes it even worse for treatment. So, yeah, there we go. So with the, it's unpredictable. An individual may be resilient for a long time and successful employee at one moment, and then all of a sudden you know, you're going to see things, his manner start, he or she's manner decline. You might see their cleanliness go down. They might withdraw themselves instead of, you know, maybe they were much more outgoing. Now they're going to withdraw themselves. That's all things we got to keep an eye on. You know, a lot of times sufferers will also go just to their own private medical doctor and they'll probably be prescribed medication. The department will never find out about that. So, you know, it's a tough mix, which they have every right to go to their own doctor, but they can, you know, it can be kept quiet and the department would never know about it and your partner may never know about it. So as you see there with the quote, that was one of the quotes we got from one of the people we interviewed, that I think the longer we let it go, the worse it could get. And that could be more difficult for the guy to maintain his job. But I think that the key, if you help the guy out early enough, there's no reason why we couldn't continue to do the job, which is, you know, definitely true. You see it all the time. You know, people go through, in every profession, people go through their ups and downs. As long as they get treated and they get helped out, they can get back into their job and become productive again.
All right, so going into the result number 3, as Tom and Alex alluded to, the main consensus that we've got was that the stigma of being labeled is the biggest deterrent for first responders not to seek help. They don't want to perceive themselves as being weak by their coworkers, especially. That's one of the main things that we've gotten, even in the peer support group, or if you're using the EAP, that's what they get throughout the conversations. They don't want to be considered as being weak. Sorry about that. Also, it's one of the, like I said, it's one of the underlying reasons first responders don't seek help is being perceived being weak. Also, sorry, I was disconnected for a second. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
All
back
right.
on.
All right. Thank you. All right. So since individuals in a position usually take care of and protect themselves, it's a natural for them to reach out for help. That's one of the things they feel that by them being the people that go to help people that are in need, for them to seek out help themselves, it's kind of unnatural for them. So that's another deterrent that stops a lot of first responders from seeking help. When they do feel the urge that they want to come out and ask for help, that's one of the big deterrents as well. The embarrassment or shame, that they don't want to be labeled. Again, the stigma was the key word that kept on popping up when we spoke to people in the field and when we spoke to the mental health professionals as well. Some people don't know how to handle it, and as Tom alluded, they self-indulge in alcohol and drugs, which the fire department does test as well on a random basis. They do have what they call a last chance. So if for some reason you are caught with some unprescribed medication or drugs or alcohol, you do get put into this last chance program, which they help you get rehabilitated. But then again, now you're labeled with not being able to take care of yourself. Again, now you have that compounded with the mental issue, which adds more to the cause of what's going on. Not sure if the slides are on there. We can slide on to the next one.
You want me to go to result 4?
No. I'm still on
result.
Yeah, the other one. All right. So another thing is the fear of gossip amongst the coworkers, and it's a shame. It's something that as a fire department, we're working toward getting better at, but it does happen. You know, people do go out. The people that do try to get treatment either by EAP or peer support, which are programs that are done. Peer support is a program that you go and you speak to your peers about what might be bothering you. The problem that we're having is that there's not enough volunteers, because this is just on a volunteer basis here. There's not enough people that volunteer to become peer support members, or that they feel that they're not being adequately trained to offer that help to people that are seeking it. So that's kind of one deterrent that is, stops people from getting help. And sometimes, as it was alluded earlier, the older members try to go get help from the members themselves, whereas the younger members, they might seek help from their families and friends. It kind of stops it. People trying to get help from EAP or the peer support that the fire department does offer due to that inadequate training that they might be providing, or that the lack of volunteerism for those two programs that are being offered as well. Other thing is that so periodically Chicago does not do this, but some departments do out there. They offer their surveys. They kind of to judge your mental stability and how you're doing. A lot of people tend to lie on these things. This became very prominent, and this is speaking from personal experience when I was getting out of the military. They would tell you, listen, we're going to give you this survey. You fill out your survey. It's based on how you're feeling mentally. But just remember, if a red flag comes out, it's going to delay you going home. So at that point, you've been deployed, you usually want to go home. So people tend to lie on these surveys just so they could get out. And eventually they start self-medicating because they didn't seek the help that they should have gotten at first place because they've been deterred not to. So people tend to not ask for the help. So the same thing is happening in the fire service and the police service. They're not telling the whole truth, about what might be hurting them. Another thing is if they do end up getting mental help, as Tom made, going to their own doctor, it becomes a billing problem because the insurance, that if they're going to go through the insurance for the city, it's going to pop up somewhere down the line, and people are afraid that once that is in the system, that the employer might be able to see that there's some instability going on. And as Tom alluded, when police officers need the FOID card, if that gets revoked at that point, they won't be able to serve as police officers anymore. So that's something else that is added to their stress of not seeking help themselves. We could go over result 4.
Well, Armando, you kind of went into that with the peer support.
Mm-hmm.
So, you want me to go into EAP now?
Sure.
All right. So just real quick again, because we kind of talked about it. I know the slides are a little bit out of sync with where we're at. Alexander, if you can go back the one for result 5. But just going from going with what Armando said with the employee assistance program, it's a great resource that we have at the Chicago Police Department. The problem is that the guys and girls just don't trust it. They don't feel that it's it has the same confidentiality as a doctor and a patient, or a lawyer and its client. And it's actually, I saw a question just pop up there on the screen about any online support. It's funny that you brought that up, because that was originally, if you remember, guys, that was originally going to be what we were going to look into doing, was creating some sort of online support system where officers and first responders can go in anonymously. But unfortunately, for the time span that we had to do and had to do our project in, and the liability, because we weren't trained professionals, that was kind of nixed, that whole idea. But it is, I believe there are some that definitely, I believe there are some online websites that officers and first responders and EMS and firefighters can go to get that help. But the EAP, they're professionals. They were some of the people that we interviewed for this research, and unfortunately, the AP, though, a lot of times gets initialized only after critical incident occurs. And by critical incident, we're talking police shootings, massive casualties and on a scene that you may have handled, or at least from the police aspect, I'm sure from the fire aspect too, where you're going to go on a scene and there's a child that was killed. That might activate it also, but it's there 24/7 for people just to go out there and get their help. So scientific data has not yet come to a consensus on both the positive and negative aspects of critical incident stress debriefing. It's not mandatory for us, at least if something happens, not mandatory for us to critically stress debriefing. It's definitely something that we think should be added though for protocol, because we think that it could definitely benefit all of us employees to serve everybody better.
Yes, I actually was wondering. This is Sherry Mata again. I'm a mental health professional, and I work with individuals who experience trauma and grief. And I've just been thinking of a lot of questions now about y'all's research. Do you know if there are any others who have followed up to add to your research?
Sherry, can you repeat that last question again, because you kind of got drowned out?
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's some background noise somewhere. There's babies crying. Y'all hear that?
Yes, definitely not mine.
That's not my baby either. Yeah, whoever has the baby in the background, if you could mute your microphone, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Hope the baby's better. But I was just curious because I do a lot of research myself on trauma and grief for individuals who've experienced gun violence, families who've lost loved ones. And I was just curious if anyone has followed up on y'all's research, because it seems like from a mental health perspective that there's a great need for that.
Not that I know of. I don't know if Armando and Alexandra have heard anything. I mean, we stay in touch with each other when we hear that someone's used our research, and if they're using it for their own studies, the best that we can. I personally have not. It would be great if someone could. It's tough, it's tough for all of us when our main job isn't doing research, that to find time to keep up on this. I try my best to stay up on current events within the PTSD world and how it affects. But unfortunately, I get drawn away with professional and personal responsibilities that I don't get to stay up on top of it as much as I was for when I was in graduate school there. So, but it's definitely something I would like to find out more about.
I know that because of mass shootings and whatnot, the mental health community has done a lot more research on trauma and grief. Individuals used to be diagnosed with complicated grief and PTSD, but now a new disorder, persistent complex bereavement disorder, is coming out of all the research. So it seems to me that maybe I should send an email to the American Psychological Association about the need for some additional research in this area, because the suicide and addiction rates, that's on top of the stigmatism there is in seeking treatment because of the subsequent employment consequences. It's like you just have to deal with the cumulative effects of exposure over and over and over again, because because of the stigmatism and because of the lack of employment after the fact, which is ridiculous. This shouldn't be this way.
Prior to us going on live here, Armando and I were going back and forth real fast in a text because we work very close to each other in the city. And he had asked me if I was working last night. I was off, but there was, in my district where I work, there were 5 people shot in one incident last night. And it's, they were 5 of 8 total that were shot yesterday in a 24-hour period. And I unfortunately work in if not the worst, the second worst neighborhood in the city. We had last year, I think our district had 60 to 65 homicides just in my district alone, and we're not talking a very large, very large area. So, unfortunately, it's like 3 miles, like 9 square miles we're talking about. It's not a huge piece of land in the city. So you do see this on a daily basis, and that's why sometimes it's problematic when we need to be very careful when we're on the street. The media is very quick to get out there, the newspapers and the television cameras. And, sometimes people will see on TV that will be laughing or smiling or something at a crime scene. Unfortunately, that doesn't portray us in the best light. But at the same time, we do have to have mechanisms to deal with what we see on a daily basis, right or wrong. That's why they call it gallows humor. So sometimes, it might not even be related to what you're seeing on the street, but you might start laughing. We're human. It's just one way of dealing with what we have, what we have to see on a daily basis.
And that's a normal response for a lot of people to deal with trauma or grief. They'll chuckle or laugh, and it's like a coping mechanism that a lot of people have. And it just seems to me, one of our students asked a question about mandatory group desensitization sessions. And, it kind of seems to me that we have mental health workers who specialize in addiction, who specialize in anxiety or depression, who specialize in family or whatnot. It just seems to me that we would have some type of professionals, especially in cities and states that have higher crime rates, that would have some mental health professionals who are experts in that particular area of accumulative PTSD or accumulative trauma.
Yeah, correct. I mean, the group sessions would be great. One thing, and it's not a negative comment towards it. It's just a comment. One thing that might get in the way of that is the unions. To make it mandatory, there might be an issue there. I do think it benefits officers, but unfortunately, not everyone likes to talk about their issues. I think down the road this may get better. I hope it gets better, just from the simple fact that if we can get officers as they start coming on the job with more information about this as they start coming on. Right now we have a generation of people that don't want to talk about things, and a generation that's so into talking and social media and that I'm thinking maybe they won't have as big of an issue with opening themselves up, since they're used to doing it on a daily basis on social media platforms. So right now you have kind of a young versus old mentality out there. But I think once everybody that starts coming up through the ranks has been kind of inoculated with this and has been taught this, that it will help going forward.
And that kind of addresses one of the other student questions. One of the questions was, with very little time for first responders to regroup on a daily basis, what techniques do you use or utilize to prevent the PTSD? And it sounds like maybe this upcoming generation who are more or feel safer talking about things, that might be one way to prevent the PTSD. Are there any techniques that you guys use? Yeah.
Well, I mean, for myself, the biggest thing is I have a great family. I have a great wife that I can talk to, who's in the medical field, so it's kind of easy to talk to her about these things. I think another big thing is just working out. I think being fit and eating properly and getting some of that stress out in a productive way, working out helps a lot. I know for like the fire department, I couldn't imagine for 24 hours I'm in the same house with the same people. So and like Armando knows firsthand with where he works, he's going to be one of those guys that goes on 20 to 25 runs a day. And a lot of those are going to be violent calls that he's going to go to. So you're not getting any sleep. You're constantly going from call to call. You're seeing the same issues. You're dealing with the family members that are obviously distraught, and trying to soak all that up and be as professional as you can, and then be expected to turn it off after your 24-hour shift and then go home. And then when you go home, you're going home in the morning, you got to take your kids to school, you got to get stuff done around the house. It's it's definitely a difficult balance.
Right.
I think that Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, my mic's been cutting on and off, so I'm going to try to jump in here before it cuts off again. Absolutely, as Tom mentioned, we work a 24-hour shift. Within those 24-hour shifts, as Tom alluded, my firehouse is close to his district, and we're in a pretty bad neighborhood. So within those 24 hours, I would say we probably run about between 22 to 30 runs within a 24-hour span. And we have to keep up those numbers because the demand is there. We constantly we get called for someone that's had an asthma. We get called for someone that got stabbed. We got called for car accidents. We get called like yesterday that we had the multiple shootings. There were five shot within a one block area. So we have to go there. We have to deal with the situation, deal with the stress from the bystanders that are yelling at us. That we have to, kind of go in there and do what we do and get out, transport the patient, provide care, take them to the hospital, and we still have to document. Obviously, we have to document our care and whatnot. And the amount of time that we're given sometimes is not enough. And so if you imagine if we have one of those that are shot as a child, so now if it usually hits home when if you're a parent as well. So now you're dealing with, you're thinking about is your child safe, and while trying to do everything at the same time, it's not very conducive. Especially running that call volume and the amount of downtime. Let's say if something would happen, your boss will come out. Are you okay? Do you need some time off? And it's you don't want to take time off because you want to continue. Sometimes if you take time off and you start thinking too much, and for me personally, I don't want to think too much. I just want to continue with my work, finish off the day, and go home. But I do notice when you get home, sometimes you're kind of disconnected from the family. Everyone's, are you okay? What's going on? You want to talk about it? Personally, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to kind of put it out to the side. When I leave my work, I don't want to take it home. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. That's how I just compartmentalize.
I can totally understand that. I know that there's a lot of research out there about the differences in the way that men and women's brains work, and men seem to be better able to compartmentalize things and kind of put it in a box in one part of the brain, where uh, women typically have larger amygdalas in the brain and work more from the emotional part. I can't imagine the stress that you guys go through. So first of all, I guess I should say thank you for y'all service. Even the police officers that work on our campuses here at the college, I've spoken to them about, do you all have, regular mental health checkups? And it's the same stigmatism here, because they don't want their, I guess, their supervisor to, they don't want to be reprimanded either for seeking out help. And one of the students asked the question, are there any open door policies anywhere where an officer could, kind of just go in and maybe get the same type of services similar to going on a temporary disability or something?
Well, as far as from the police aspect, you can definitely go to the employee assistance program. So that's an off. They have their own building. Everything is private. Everything is confidential. So they can go there. They can call them up at any time. There's always someone on call, and it's a way for them to talk. As far as a temporary leave, I mean, yes, for the department there are medical absences. I don't know if I don't know what it entails mentally, because for everything that I know about the medical, it's something physical that happened to you. You're running after someone, you twisted an ankle. God forbid you got shot, something like that. That's that's part of it. The pushing the privacy thing with the EAP, is very important, because that's where, that's the one resource they can go to, that they don't have to worry about information getting back to the department. And, I believe it's the same as for like a psychiatrist or psychologist, that unless they are saying that they're going to do harm to someone. Is that correct, Sherry?
So I'm sorry, repeat that. It cut out just for
That the privacy goes pretty much as deep as it can go, except if you express that you wanted to do harm to somebody.
right, exactly. If you express that you're going to harm yourself here in Texas, if you express if you're going to harm yourself, or you're a danger to somebody else, then that's the only way a psychologist, psychiatrist, or counselor would have to report.
Okay, so I mean, from my standpoint as a supervisor, the sergeants in the police department are the first line of defense. It's the first line of supervisors that the officers come in touch with. Unfortunately, you're going to come, just like in any other job, you're going to come across a supervisor that just doesn't care, or is just there to put in his time and then leave. I myself, my dad was on the job. He had problems with alcohol. He used the EAP, so I saw firsthand how the EAP did help. So I try to get it out there as much as I can, that group is there to help them. It's not there to hurt them. It is private and confidential. They did a lot of great work for my dad. And, I just try to put that out there whenever I see an officer that has a problem. I had the unfortunate circumstance. It was 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years ago this Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving that night, my guys come in after going to their family's house for Thanksgiving. Two of my guys got into a shooting. They killed an individual who had a gun. I handled that on the street. So you go from having one, you go to having a family dinner, and a couple hours later, you probably go through what could be the most traumatic event in your life. 2 days later, two other officers that I have got into a shooting and killed the subject that was firing back at them. So, you have all that in one weekend. That was on a Sunday when that happened. The first one was on Thursday night into Friday morning. My goal was just to be there for these officers and let them know, that everything is, okay. We're going to get through this together. And because there's still paperwork that has to be done. The job still needs to be done. And, people unfortunately get used to what they see on TV. Bad guy goes down, their day's over. It doesn't work like that. We still have to write our reports. We still, they still have to talk to detectives. They have to talk to, now we have a civilian oversight organization that looks over our stuff. So they have a lot to deal with on their plate in that short amount of time. So it's key for the supervision to be there for these officers. I see quite a few supervisors that are there, so which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds to me like you're an excellent supervisor. I've got about 4 more questions, and we got maybe like 6, 7 more minutes. I'm going to go through these fast. If an officer was to be taken off duty due to PTSD, would they have to worry about a pay cut? Or are they on a leave of absence without pay, or do they still get paid?
If they're put on the medical, or what we call our medical, they still get paid. I have yet to personally experience, from the police standpoint, I have yet to personally experience the only time that they get stripped is if they've been, what I mean by that is of their weapon, is and then they can't work on the street, is when they've been involved in an incident that's under investigation. That's the only time. I have yet to see it from a mental health standpoint. Doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, unfortunately, or fortunately. I just have yet to come across it. I don't know how it is on the fire department, Armando.
So on the fire department, same as the police, if you're put on medical, you do get paid. The problem is the policy that's in place right now is a little outdated, if you will. It has to be revamped a lot, I should say. A lot of people don't do it because, again, the stigma. It seems like once you go on medical, people tend to find out why you're on medical leave. Although you are getting paid, people do want to go back out and work in the capacity that they're being paid for. But it seems like there's a lot of hoops that are being implemented for this individual to get back on the street. Unfortunately, there isn't much of kind of difference between being able to go back to work in full capacity and being able to go back to work in a limited capacity. We don't have like a light duty, if you will, where you could go if you can't work on the street for some reason, you could go work there. That seems to be the problem. You know, the programs that they have, it's there to help you, but it seems like the problem is if someone gets hurt because they broke their arm, they know, you know, they'll take an X-ray. Yes, it's broken. 6 weeks. Oh, here we'll get some rehab. You know, we give it 2 months, you'll be back on the street. But now you're talking about a mental health issue. It's not like you could take an X-ray or a CAT scan and you could tell, okay, it's going to take, you know, X amount of weeks.
Right.
People tend not to want to do that because now they're risking. Although you do get paid, you do have a limit of how long you get paid for. So once that limit starts reaching its max, you have to decide on how you're going to handle it, or how is the city going to proceed with you? Are they going to try to terminate you? Are they going to try to find a spot for you where you can actually work that's not on the street? There's a lot of variables that come into play, and people don't want to be put in that position where their livelihood is in the hands of someone else. It's not them. Who knows if they have their best interest or if it's just based on liability that the city is going to want to cut ties with you, which one way or the other.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah. One of the students asked if PTSD would include child molestation, and I'll answer that. Yes, any kind of trauma, whether it's an environmental trauma like a hurricane or a tornado, or any kind of gun violence, or even just, everyone's different. So where one person could successfully get therapy for molestation, or for being a first responder, or for being a soldier, or any other traumatic event. Even individuals who perform CPR on someone, if it's your family member, that could be very traumatic for you. So we all have our own way of healing and our own way of going through therapy. So yes, that would include anyone who experienced rape or molestation or any other kind of sexual deviant act like human trafficking or whatnot. One of the students asked the question that since most first responders are exposed to more traumatic incidents in a month than the average citizen does in a whole lifetime, do you ever find yourself being kind of numb or callous when you relate to other people, kind of like disconnecting and being absent?
Personally, I do. We do see a lot of trauma. And personally, from where I work, maybe in a week than most people do see in their entire lives. You kind of tend, everyone deals with it differently. I like I stated earlier, I tend to kind of put it in a box and just put it away. Is it the healthiest? Probably not, but it seems to work for me somewhat. I recently got a dog. I think that's helped me. So you find things that's going to help you. Everyone's different, so you have to find what's good for you and how it's going to help you.
And like I said,
Right.
I'm sure my wife and kids will probably disagree, but I think I handle it pretty well. And I try to just make sure that I get out what I need to get out as far as emotionally and talk and make sure that I get that shoulder to lean on. And then
Yeah.
seriously, it's working out has really proved to be
Yeah.
very valuable to me.
Yes. Three more questions, and we only have like 1 or 2 minutes left. Have you ever seen where PTSD's played a role in officers using excessive force when not needed?
Not if they used excessive force. I mean, there was no way that I would have known that it would have been via PTSD. And to be honest, I really, in 18 years, I can be honest that on one hand, I could probably count the amount of times that I've actually seen what might be deemed as excessive force. Again, that's another discussion, but I think that because we're so media involved in this country that you see it so much on TV that you believe that it's constantly happening out there, and it's not necessarily the case.
Agreed. There's a lot more officers who don't experience that at all than those that do. And two last questions. One of the other students brought up a question I was curious about as well. Because treating one-time exposure is so much different than treating the cumulative, have you heard of anyone using EMDR or TFT as treatment? That's eye movement desensitization reprocessing or thought field therapy for first responders.
I had never heard it. I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, EMDR, there's a lot of research and it's shown to be very, very effective in PTSD in soldiers. So we also use that with individuals who experience traumatic grief, like if your son is murdered or, there's a gang drive-by or whatnot. We use that eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and others are using thought field therapy as treatment. So that was a good question, Casey. Thanks for asking that. And the last question we have for you all is, what can we do to assist in the effort for helping first responders, maybe in the research area or in the psychological community or as students who want to volunteer? What can we do?
You know what? That's actually a great question. I think foremost, if research is needed, obviously, the more after the research that we've done, and as Tom stated also, I haven't been made aware of much other research being done as far as first responders and PTSD. I know a lot of money and research has gone into soldiers returning home and PTSD. So, and there's a lot of similarities there as well. So they're kind of just taking their findings from that and kind of putting it into our scenarios. But research is probably going to be one of the top things. Also, another thing that helps is if people actually do go out there and they call their congressman. This is not anything politics, but there has been legislature presented, I think, in the Northeast and in Florida, where they've had allowed PTSD in first responders to be considered a disability, where if they are actually diagnosed, they're able to get disability out of that. I believe that was in Florida as of recently, maybe 2 months ago, and somewhere in the Northeast, probably Maine and New York. But that has to come from a legislator, where they change the verbiage and how once it's changed statewide, these cities and municipalities could actually change it from their end as well, where it starts moving in the right direction, where people that are having problems, they could find it easier to go and seek treatment because they know that at the end of their medical, they won't be given a choice where you have to decide on what you want to do if you want to continue getting paid.
Right. I think that all those are some great ideas. Continuing the research. I think we need more expert counselors trained in that area, and utilizing some of the resources like the soldiers get. And obviously, yes, contacting your local congressman or congresswoman for our legislature to act on this important issue. It's a very important issue. And I would like to give y'all one idea, not that you don't have enough to do at your job and with your families, but reaching out to some of the local universities and getting some of the criminal justice students involved or getting some of the paramedic students involved might help to further the research, and at the same time, hitting up some of the schools that offer counseling, they may be able to start focusing on getting counselors specifically in your area. who are more
Yeah.
experts in that particular, treating that particular issue.
It's definitely,
And
definitely something to look at.
yes, so students, do not forget to fill out the survey form. There's a link in the chat bar there. And again, I would just like to thank Armando Thomas and Alexandra for sharing their time and expertise with us this evening. It's been a great session.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you very
very,
much.
and feel free to just click out of the link at any time. Students, again, make sure you fill out the survey if you want to be counted as attending this session. Some of the students may have to copy and paste the link, and make sure you're using Chrome as your browser. The Google Forms prefer Chrome. Casey, the survey is the chat bar right there. It's just the Google form. Just click on it or copy and paste it.